Hey y'all, I'm James Wright, and welcome to the shop.
Who are you?
Hi, Mr. Hand Tool Rescue. Today we're in his shop, and we are going to be working on two foot-powered lathes, over 100 years old. We're going to be completely restoring them side by side and having a good bit of fun.
It's going to be fantastic.
So let's dive into this.
Let's do it. This is just so smooth. Okay, so it's just so smooth, guys, you know. Do you hear that? It's the sound of pure smoothness.
Yes, 400 pounds of foot-powered lathe are loaded into my little car, and we're driving 20 hours north into Canada. The border security was a little bit confused why I'd be carrying all of this in a little car, and I had to do a full search with the dogs and everything, but eventually we made it to Hand Tool Rescue, and he's got a great shop, which he was able to build a couple years ago, actually a little over a year ago. And so we started disassembling these. I brought two lathes up, and he's going to keep one, and I'm going to take one back with me. And this was a great opportunity to kind of play with these and see them side by side. His is a good bit older than mine, so a little bit more antique, and mine is a little bit newer, but still around 100 years old. Most of the disassembly is fairly straightforward, but some of the screws were really in there. I've got to get one of these impact drivers. That just really made the work much easier. On these gearing plates, one of them was screwed in, but mine was actually nailed in. There's drilled holes with these brass nails that go in. So we can actually take all the pieces over and start tearing them apart. I'm sorry for the footage on this. I didn't realize that my settings were way off on my camera until too late. This is only a little bit of the footage is this way. I didn't realize until halfway through the first day. The cam on the back of this was a little bit difficult to figure how it came apart, as it was just so covered in grease until we could finally see the cracks on it. The main shaft, you have to take this brass screw bearing out, and then the whole thing can slide out. On the front, the front bearing is split into two pieces so that it will wrap around the shaft much easier. There is a little collar on the shaft with a set screw, but then that collar has to be pounded off. It takes a good bit of work, but once you finally get it out, the whole thing comes apart. On the tool rest and all of the tools in here, it's a fairly easy process. Other than this pivot, I found this to be kind of interesting, how it has a round pivot, but then it has this brass insert that holds it in place. Some of these pieces were just so tight on there, this has never come apart before, so we had to use a little bit of brute force and violent manipulation. Two of my favorite tools that eventually will do the work. We're gonna, once we have everything apart, we're soaking it in the evaporust about 24 hours. Just let it soak in that big tub. Got to get one of those big tubs. That is phenomenal. For all the painted parts, we're going to use a chemical stripper and scrape them down, except for the Japanning. That just takes a while to cook off. And then once we have that off, then we can put them in for the rust bath. Once we take those out, then we can wire wheel off all of the gunk and excess. And some of these rods were a little more difficult. I know some people are going to be whining about the fact that I have gloves on with this. It's not a problem with this machine because it's so underpowered that I can actually grab the head and stop it. So the gloves actually add a little bit of protection as well as keep my fingers clean. But this was a long process for all of these parts, and there were lots and lots and lots of parts, each one needing to be wire wheeled down and then set aside and kept straight. Eric actually did far better at actually keeping all the parts separate, so he knew which section they went with. I made the decision to put them all into a pot, which didn't hurt me too much in the end, but there were a couple times like, which place does this screw go? And then I ended up taking a few screws home I had to ship back to him. For the main body, we found putting a wire brush on a grinder allowed us to cut through a lot of the gunk on this, and there was a lot of gunk. Some old Japanning, some paint, other things that were just caked on from years. There were several parts that we had to have made. We found a foundry, cattail foundry, that had patterns for some of these, and some of the parts I was able to send him others to cast. But we had to do some of the machining so that they would fit onto the shafts, as well as put in set screws to hold them in place. You can see how this is all going together with little bits and pieces. Yeah, I love that. Then we also had to do some sandblasting. There were some things that just wouldn't fit in the evaporust, or they needed more aggressive work, especially this pedal. We had one set of pedals for Eric's, and we needed to have a set of pedals for mine. So we ended up making a set. We got this 7/8 steel shaft, and then bent it into shape, heating it up, and then checking it against the one pedal we did have to make sure that it actually was the very, very similar shape and size. We missed up a couple of the bends, but in the end it's working. It's just not 100% accurate, but close enough to be functional. So my lathe is completely functional, and his is more of the original antique. Once we have this all zigzagged and made, we have the collars slid on, and those will be what the pedals will ride on. So we can cool it down, and now we can actually make the pedals that will go onto this. We have several sheets of 1/8 inch steel that we're going to be cutting to 4.5 inches wide, and these will make triangular pedals that sit on there and spin. So we can weld together one of the 3 corners and then put it into place on the shaft and weld it to those collars that we slid on while we're bending, and this would allow it to rotate. I ended up choosing the wrong size collar on there, and it was a bit too tight. I wish I'd gotten a size larger, like a 1/16 inch bigger. It would have made it work a little bit easier, but in the end it came out pretty well. So we can cut off the excess, and then I have my my pedal strut for mine. Yay! Power tools just make things so much faster. I mean, that's just incredibly fast compared to a hacksaw. Oof, okay. On Eric's, there was one gear that was missing a tooth, so we ended up filing that out and then filling in with brazing and then carving down that tooth. So one tooth is basically a brass tooth, but as long as there's a good file connection on there, it works out pretty well. Heat up the gear, add in the brazing rod, and we'll have a big pile of shmoo on there that we can kind of carve down into that last tooth. So it was probably about 20-30 minutes worth of file work, and then we got it pretty close. So you can see this is where it's pretty close. He did a little bit more work on it a little later, make sure it's nice and smooth, but that's what we kind of do for that one. For the big parts, we had a second round in the evaporust because we had the big gears and the seats that had to go in there as well. Then it was time for painting, which means we need to start taping things off. So all of the surfaces we don't want paint, we tape them off or put in paste wax and then cut them nice and clean so we have good sharp edges all the way across there. And especially on the ways, we didn't touch these at all, didn't grind them, didn't shape them, because we want to keep the ways as true as possible. We'll be doing a little bit of work on those in the future. We're going to be using a self-etching primer to fill in all of the gaps and seal it to the metal. I really like self-etching primer. It works phenomenally well. Most of the pieces, it's just hit them all the way around, and then others, it's be very delicate about where you go. Like on the big flywheel, we don't want the paint to be on the outside of the flywheel, we'll just want it to be on the inside of the flywheel. And then it's time for the seats. Many of you may have seen that I painted one of these orange. That was just for a gag on Eric's video, which you've got to go see. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, we're basically spraying everything down. This took a good long while, and his shop smelled like bananas for, a while. Spray paint can get to you. That's why we're both wearing respirators and trying to get as much off as we can, although we both have beards on, so I don't know how good that actually did. So that was where I ended up at his shop, and we brought it all back to mine, or mine back to mine, and we can actually start doing the painting. Yes, I'm using blue. Anytime I restore a tool for my own personal use, I have a metallic blue that I use. I'll try and leave a link to that down below. And this is just my shop color, and I love the way it looks. It's just really sharp. Now for the ways, I wanted to make sure that they were clean and true, so I used my diamond plate to scrape down the face, and I was very, very happy. They were really, really clean. They didn't require much at all. So just using a coarse diamond on there, and then the fine diamond, I was able to get a really nice clean surface on there. Now we can start sliding all the pieces back in place and reassembling the whole thing. Oiling as we go. Any raw steel surface needs oil, particularly if there's any two surfaces that rub against each other. I like to err on the side of too much oil, and that way I can always wipe it off. If you put something together and there isn't enough oil inside, you just start wearing on parts against each other. So it makes it a little bit easier to oil things down. I love taking off the tape. It just makes everything look so good. But the reassembly was a little bit more tricky because I had all the bolts in one pile, but it went fairly quickly. I think it was like 5 or 6 hours worth of work to reassemble this. This little piece has a spring detent in there, and this is what allows you to put it onto the two shafts so that it will auto feed left or right. And so the shafts have to go all the way through the main body, through this little block, and then out the screws on the other side. And this can then connect to the tool rest, the slider. Oh, I can't remember what the actual name for that is. Someone will comment down below with that. More screws, more attaching, and it's just kind of a piece-by-piece thing as we go. On the little number plate, this actually lists out all the gears for the change gears so you can cut threads for this. I just had to reshape it because it was bent a little bit and then tap it back in place. I didn't fill in all of the original coloring in the letters. I thought about doing that, but I just thought I'd leave it normal. I kind of like the look on it. It's still completely readable. So then we can slide all the shaft back in together, make sure that the brass bearings and all fit in. You want to make sure that those are really nice and clean so that you don't have anything riding inside the brass bearing, tearing them up. And then, of course, oiling as we go. And, ooh, I really like that. Yeah. Then we can put the slide back in. And this is one of these things that I just find fascinating. This little brass piece that goes in here. And then there's a screw that clamps it down on. And basically, the tighter you push that, the more that brass piece will clamp it into place and will lock it at that angle. And then you can loosen up the screw, and that will allow you to turn it to a specific angle so you can actually put a taper on the end of something. Now we start working on the pedal structure. Now that the flywheel is in place, we can set the pedals down below. And this will allow us to put the chain on, and so we can know exactly how long the chain will be. This is a machining, what is the word, industrial farm chain, number 25. It's slightly different from the original. We have enough of the original for Eric's, but not for mine. And so there's a bit of a clacking noise as it goes through it on this because it's an ever so slightly different shape. But in the end, it actually works pretty well. And so this will go around the flywheel pulley down to the pedals, and then the pedals are on these little hangers that seemed kind of precarious, but after using it they work really well, and I was very surprised with how they go on there and just bolt in place and are held in place with friction. But once those are hanging, we can turn it and give it a test drive. Put the set screws in on both of the sprockets and make sure that everything's running, and whoo! This is so much fun. I was so happy once this goes. Now you do have to pedal this in reverse so that the head is turning in the correct direction. If you pedal it forward, then the head is turning away from you and your cutting tools won't cut. So it feels kind of odd for like the first moment you get going. Once you get going, it's perfectly fine. Last thing we need to do is put on a belt, and this is an 1.25 inch leather belt. We're going to be putting a traditional stitching on this to hold the two ends together, which is a little bit of like a weird zigzag pattern. But underneath, all the stitching is in line with the belt, and then on top, it kind of goes in this zigzag pattern. I have several videos on YouTube showing how to do this. It's a fairly straightforward stitch, but it's one of these things that's very pleasing. You do put the belt on smooth side down, not rough side. I know that's a little counterintuitive. But you do get a better friction from the smooth side than you do from the rough side. Yeah, that's just the way it is. And then we can take it for a test drive. Ooh, oh yes, it's working. Happiness, oh, I'm getting excited. Now, I needed to make a piece for this, and so I thought this was a great opportunity to work on this. We needed a little bit of a brass collar to fit on one of the gears for the change gears. So I needed to drill out the inside as well as taper down the outside, and it gave me a chance to actually play with this. And I love how smooth this works. You can see the bolt on the back there where it needs to go. Once we got it down to place, I need to do a little bit, I need to get a better tooling for this and actually spend some time working on those. But you can see how that little collar goes on there, and then it fits into place. Now, this is designed so you can fit two gears on the back here, so you can do several different changes, so you can set the amount that the feed runs to how the head runs, so that you can actually get a specific feed rate for cutting threads in bolts. And that's about it. Everything up on this is up and running, and we're good to go. I wanted to get this because I wanted to do a bunch of tool projects in the future where I need to turn things, metal things. But also I'm going to be doing some wood turning on this as well. You can do others on it, so this will be a great tool to have in the project for many, many uses to come. I don't know about you, but I'm getting excited about ways I can use this in the future. You can see how this will go through all of these change gears, then down to the drive shafts underneath, and this will then drive the head from side to side. So you can see how it's cranking one way, and then I can turn the lever, and it cranks the other way. Yay, exciting! Yeah, the feed rate on this is so much fun, and you can put it on neutral, lock it back down in, and it'll continue cranking. This is just a phenomenal old tool that blows my mind every time I get to use it, and I'm just so excited about using this in the future. There are so many cool things that I can do with this, and it will be a great addition to the shop. Exciting. So there you have it. This was a fun one that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I now have a foot-powered lathe in my shop, although for us, the lathe isn't done yet. It's still sitting over there in primer. But we're going to take it back to my shop and have a little bit of fun. So I hope you guys like this. If you don't know Hand Tool Rescue, what rock have you been hiding under? You got to go check out his channel. There are links to it down below and up above, and all those normal spots.
They're in your washroom.
Watch out.
All the links are stored.
Once you click on one of those links, he'll be stalking you.
Yes.
So I hope you like this build. This was a really fun one. I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas, comments down below. If you do have anything you think I did wrong or think I should do better, let me know that as well. And I think that'll about do it. And definitely check out his channel, because he has the whole build from another perspective that isn't blue. Who wouldn't paint their blue?
No, it's fantastic having you here. Thank you very much for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Very much appreciate you bringing 2 lathes across the border.
It's only a 20-hour drive up.
Yeah, it's only 20 hours. Yeah. Really appreciate it. We've had a lot of fun.
So you need to come down to my shop next time, and we'll do something with hand tools.
I'll steal stuff. All the tools.
So I think that'll do it for today, and I want to say a huge thank you to all the patrons on Patreon and everyone who's been supporting the channel. If you'd like to help out the channel in any way, there are links to that down below. So that's it for now, and until next time, have a wonderful day. So today we are going to be working with power tools, but we're doing them on a pedal-driven lathe. So that means we're taking the pedal to the metal.